It's weird. I align with a lot of things, not totally, but like I listen to progressives and libertarians on the radio, and I think, God, that makes so much sense. But it's weird to be categorized. I couldn't categorize myself. I'm definitely not a neoconservative, and but I also think it just comes down to different issues. Where do you stand on every single issue in life? And these are all just decisions, and if somebody wants to, it's like with your health. I heard a guy the other day say, I have sciatica. And I thought, well, that just means you need to stretch. It's like whatever decision you make about anything, you can be classified as something. You could be categorized and put into this sort of, put into a corner like, oh, he's that or he's that. The reason I liked that Cynthia McKinney woman was because she voted against a lot of things that were just reactions to 9/11 before any of it was really known, before there was an investigation into 9/11, before there was any study. She had enough foresight to say, we don't know anything yet. And so we shouldn't make a knee-jerk reaction to these things. And she was willing to put her neck on the line to lose her congressional seat, which did happen in the next election, in order to stand up for her principles, which I liked. And I may not agree with all of her principles, but in that circumstance, I like that it was about, well, let's know what we're doing before we say something about it. It's weird because I grew up shooting guns and owning guns, but I'm against owning guns now. I'm not necessarily against the fact that people can own guns. I don't think that just the military should have them and people should all be quiet and all that kind of thing. But I'm, it's just a knee-jerk reaction. When you hear somebody walk in with a semi-automatic rifle and start opening up on a crowd that's in the dark, you just think, fuck. Can't we do something about this? But you can't. These are, ultimately, these are just humans who make really bad decisions for whatever reason. And then that, you start to really break it down, and, culture needs to be blamed, because then you start to deal with, you get a lot of outcasts. You get somebody who's weird, and all of a sudden everyone starts treating them weird, and they become an outcast, and then they get judged, and people don't treat them nicely. Ultimately, that weird kid in school that you were in school with, he goes crazy and wants to kill everybody. And it's not necessarily your fault, but you didn't help to change that either. So, we just have a weird thing in the world, where we have a huge lack of understanding for each other, for society and for culture, and those things are more interesting to me than talking about surfing. That to me, that's life and that's the world, and surfing's just something we do when we have some free time. But those are more important debates for culture and societies, and I'm just a citizen like anyone else when it comes down to it, and those things interest me. I don't think, I don't really believe in the idea necessarily of there's a true right and wrong for everything. I think when you dig into it and you actually open things up, yeah, there is the right and wrong decision ultimately, but people are always going to make mistakes and choose the wrong decision in order to learn what is right. And that's unfortunate, but that's the way the world is. So, well, it's funny. When I was a kid, there was the stereotype of a surfer. There was definitely a certain culture. It's the way you talked. It's like smoking weed, partying, not having responsibilities for anything. And that's not necessarily true, but there is truth in that. That is part of our culture. Surfing comes from a sort of an outcast, sort of expat kind of, it's sort of a singular thing, just the act of surfing is you surf by yourself on a wave, and it was for a lot of people who wanted to do their own thing. That's what the sort of the roots of surfing is from. On top of having fun, having a good time, and so at the same time, that's just one part of what surfing is. I mean, there's every walk of life that surfs. It's just that's what stigma has been attached to surfing, probably because a lot of probably a lot of the guys who dropped out of Vietnam went surfing, you know, and they probably went down to Central America and disappeared, went to Mexico and Costa Rica and places like that, and just they're like, well, we don't want to fight, we want to go surf. And you know, I know a lot of guys from my town who somehow got themselves out of Vietnam, got themselves out of the draft, and ended up becoming, you know, they were just surfers and they didn't want to deal with war. And you know, and that whole period of time was really tormenting for young guys, you know, for late teens and guys in their early 20s, get thrown into this thing on the other side of the world in a culture you know nothing about, you know, in a foreign world, not knowing if you're going to die every day. It's like scary. So, you know, there was that kind of, there was a little bit of a kind of a crazy culture that came out of that, and you know, the connection with surfing and that era of you know, there was a lot of experimentation of drugs, and you know, in the 60s and 70s with you know, with LSD and whatever other drugs are coming out, and guys smoking weed, and you know, that was just an appealing thing for guys who like to surf too. And you know, and there was probably the odd, there was the odd drug runner in the bunch too. You know, I think when I started to surf and when I started to compete and started to see that was sort of an expected image of a surfer. Me personally, I wanted to change that about myself. I didn't want people to think that about me. You know, I wanted to be accepted at school too. That was probably a big part of some of my decisions. I wanted the principal to allow me to have extra days off and not flunk me, not fail me, because I wanted to go surf contests, and you know, a lot of other guys in other sports and baseball and stuff that didn't even get the credit I did from our principal. So I took that as like that was kind of a badge of honor for me, that she let me have days off to go surf contests that, you know, in the eyes of our school and our community, surfing wasn't that big of a thing. And so it was, you know, I probably felt like an obligation there to uphold a certain level of respectability. And you know, I like to see that go through the sport. And you know, I don't want it to be watered down in any way, or people to not be who they are. But I also didn't want to have, you know, culture not respect surfers as people.